Martin. I am so excited to have you on For Real. Thank you for joining me.
I am thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh man, we had to reschedule. And so this is like, I feel like I'm going to Disneyland. It's finally happening,
It's
even though
finally
I
here.
really don't love Disneyland, but that's a different conversation. I'm so excited to have you in the week of your release. You seem very well rested on Zoom. So whatever you're doing a good job.
I did not feel well rested. After this weekend, the weekend helped.
Yeah.
And I was like hanging on for dear life, like just gotta, and I was just saying no to things like go ahead to the football game, family. I'm not a football person anyway, but like I'm just going to stay home on the couch, and I'm going to stay home from church, and I'm going to stay on the couch. So I did what I had to do, and it helped.
You are a wise woman to do that. You and I were talking before we turned on microphones about how there's this misconception, I think, in the writing life that launch day is balloons and confetti and your publisher's calling you and giving you real-time sales updates. Right. Has that been your experience?
No, in fact, it hasn't, Kim. I actually took the picture I took of myself and put on the internet forever was like basically me rolling out of bed, taking my kids to school, and then being like, I should post a picture of myself with the books, but I look a fright. But oh well. Like totally. you would imagine, I would imagine like on your book launch day, you would at least look cute. And I didn't even do that. So, and I already regret it. I'm like, this is the photo that will forever represent the launch day of this poor baby book. It's mama did not do herself proud that day. But you know what? But I will say, I feel a deep commitment in my soul to presenting myself on the internet the way my neighbors see me, and my neighbors see me more like that than like any kind of fancy. So it's like the internet might as well know. I'm just not a very fancy person. Exactly. I don't like getting ready. And if I don't have to, I'm not gonna. So here we are.
No, I love that. And I love for aspiring writers to hear that, because then you don't feel like there's some balloon puncturing when that happens to you. Like you and I were talking, for sure, I have cleaned toilets, I think every launch day, because by the time you get to that day, you realize you haven't done a thing in your house. So somebody better do something. Yeah.
I got groceries. I got groceries that day because I was like, I should do that.
Yeah.
Like I should put some food in the house. And apparently on my launch days when I have time, it makes no sense. It makes no sense.
Totally true. I totally hear you. Well, listen, I can barely not talk about this. Let's just go straight to it, because your new book, Start with Hello and Other Simple Ways to Live as Neighbors, is fantastic, Shannan. I loved this book. I just want to take a second before I completely lose my mind about the book. Let's just take a second to talk about your writerly prowess, because a lot of folks maybe have a message to share and that burns in them until they get it out on paper. And then there are other folks who love the craft of writing and telling a beautiful story and language. And you, my friend, are the duo of both of those things. You are Wonder Twin Activate about that, which is just so much. It makes it so fun to read. And I want to know, before we even start with the content, did you always know you would be that person? Is the writer in you that was always a part of things?
No, thank you for saying that kind thing. First of all, it means a lot to me. I never saw myself on this path. It was never in my mind to be a writer. Although I will say, like in high school, writing I always preferred essay tests to any other kind, because I knew like I could
you could work it.
I knew I could be good with the words. And then I did end up out of college. I mean, I was in a writing heavy major in college. It was something that kind of came easily to me to a certain point. And then I was, in jobs right out of college, I was doing some writing. And so, but it wasn't creative writing, it was more kind of like technical writing type of thing. So I can look back behind me and see, I was maybe there was part of me that was kind of primed for writing, but I never imagined it as a career. I was never somebody who was like a journaler. A lot of writers, they're like filling journals, and since they've been 12, they've been filling these journals. That was never me. But yeah, I started blogging 100 years ago. I blogged prolifically for a decade. And I can look back now and say, I was practicing. I was practicing finding my voice, finding my rhythm. And now I would say it's something that matters deeply to me. Like my poor editors, and specifically my poor copy editors, have to suffer through that process with me because it matters to me, not even like how do the words look, but how do they sound together? Like I want a certain, I write with kind of a certain rhythm and I want it to flow right. And so I nitpick at it forever and ever. And yeah, so it does matter to me. So thank you.
Well, listen, I'm just saying, good job, copy editors, but also that's fantastic that they get a client like you, they get an author like you, because that it pays back in spades for the reader. You're right that the rhythm that you have, this disciplined rhythm that feels like I'm hearing you in my kitchen. You're talking to me across the table, but that you've crafted these sentences so beautifully. So really well done. Really well done.
Thank you. Thank you.
I feel like your book is just a kick in the tush.
A gentle one.
A gentle,
okay, good
one. No, I prefer. I am the kind of friend who, junior high was hard for me because I prefer a kick in the tush. Just tell me the truth.
I know. I'm the same.
I love it that it's like this wise untangling of some of these things we've gotten wrong about being in a community and being a neighbor. For example, you say we have this idea that folks with rich, deep community kind of just happened upon it, right? That friendships with neighbors mean that you just got lucky, got the right neighbor, the right street. So I would love for you to talk a little bit about dispelling that myth, because you say that it's not really luck.
Right. I would very much say that. I just think even outside of even neighboring, I use the word neighbor really widely. And I do spend a lot of time because I believe it's important for us to, wherever we are. And I wanted to start with hello to be accessible to a variety of people in a variety of places. So wherever we are, here we are. Right. And we're going to be here for some length of time. It just makes sense that we would spend our lives at least knowing and being known on some level by the people closest to us. So I certainly am referring to next door neighbors, the people on your block, people in your neighborhood. But I'm also just speaking more broadly of weaving this fabric of community where, we have a lot of different layers of friendship, and we have our very best friends, the people we would go on vacation with, the people who we have so much in common with. And then we have our favorite cashier at Kroger, and we have the crossing guards at the end of our street. And we have, school teachers and other sports moms and people at church, and, on and on it goes. And when you pull all those threads together, that's the sturdy fabric of togetherness and abundance and community that we really do want. So yeah, I mean, I think it's like a little bit of a both. And, like we want to have these rich connections, but it's so easy to look out and feel like, well, I don't have them, so I guess that's not for me.
Right.
And what I'm saying is I really believe it's for all of us. And somebody's got to go first. And why not us? Right. So start with hello to some extent is kind of like a pep talk for being the one to go first, because it can feel intimidating, scary, awkward, whatever adjective you want to put in there. But it's possible, it's within reach. And I know that right now we kind of look out around us and it's like, oh, this is a terrible time to try to get to know people. Like things feel pretty fractured, pretty divided, and we just don't have to settle for this. So I'm just here to say, like, what if we really believed that we didn't have to settle for this? What if we really believed that, those types of connections were not just old timey and, they're not meant for today? I think they still are. And I know that they still are.
Yeah, I would say your book makes a great case, and that I think is true to my bones, that the only way back from the fracturing is what you're talking about.
That's it.
Not that this is the worst time to do it. This is actually the time. This is the time.
It's now or never. I mean, it's got to be now. It's got to be now. And, it can feel like such a big the problems can loom so large. But I want to remind us that as every neighborhood becomes more connected, just one little neighborhood, wherever you are, whatever your neighborhood looks like, if that became just a little bit more connected, that makes the world a little bit more connected.
Right.
And if a bunch of us kind of grabbed onto this idea that we don't have to be afraid of each other, we don't have to live behind a closed, locked door for the rest of our lives. We can kind of come out into the streets together and learn faces and names and go from there, start really small. And as a bunch of us do that, the world becomes better. It becomes more connected. It becomes safer. It becomes more fun.
Right. One of the reasons I love it that you wrote this book is because you are a self-proclaimed introvert. So we have folks listening who are like, yeah, I don't talk to the crossing guard.
Right.
That is distinctly outside of my lane.
Yeah.
And you name yourself as least likely to succeed in neighboring.
Yeah.
You just thought you had the wrong personality. So
for
speak
sure.
to that.
I still feel that way.
Okay. Talk to me about that, because most folks, lots of folks listening are absolutely thinking that too. Like, we'll leave the block party to loud Sally across the street, right? So talk to me about that.
Yeah, I'm wired to be an introvert. I would almost always, if given the choice, if it was left up to me, and thank goodness it's not, because if left up to me, I would stay home on the couch reading my book, as I referenced at the top of the show. And there's a time for that. This is who I am, and I want to honor who I am, and I want to give myself the space to rest and recover when I need to. But for example, this is like real life example, hot off the presses. Yesterday was Sunday. So after, just staying in my PJs for half the day and resting, we had a block party. But what I want to say is I didn't plan the block party. And I shared about this on Instagram, and I wanted to make that clear because I think people can have this idea that, because I talk about these things and I believe in them so much, that I'm just out there like moving and shaking. My next door neighbors planned it. And I was so self-aware as I was like making my chili, to take to the chili dinner. I was just aware of like, I just don't know if I'm up for this. I just don't know if I can do it. I just don't know if I want to, all those thoughts. Right. And then you go to the chili dinner, and you just have basic normal conversations with the people around you, and you come home and you're smiling ear to ear, and it's like every time, like clockwork, every single time I push myself out of that comfort zone. And it's not so hard. We're just talking about pretty basic, easy things. We're eating some chili, we're eating, some really delicious cornbread. And you come home feeling more connected. I come home feeling like, oh, I belong here. People know me. I know them. This is my place. This is my home. We find ways that we can kind of help each other out a little bit. We have some newcomers to our neighborhood who have certain needs, and it's like, oh, we can help with this, which feels amazing. It's just, I learn over and over again that pushing myself past my initial comfort zone always reaps rewards for me, always. And so I know if I can do that, I might not always be the one planning the thing. Sometimes I might be, we just kind of take turns doing these things and being pretty normal and chill about things. But when we can put ourselves out there to just be a part of this, we just don't regret it. It is just a better way.
Yeah. I love that. I love it that it's a real-time example. I love that you are actually, I really love it that you're not the person organizing all the time.
Yeah.
Because
me too.
Folks, yeah, I bet. But that is exactly what you're talking about, that if it's a rich community of real people who don't always look cute and are still seeing each other, then it takes the pressure off of one person being the nexus of all of that, which is not sustainable anyway.
Yeah.
So,
well, and there's going to be one person planning, whatever it is, there's one person planning and the other people get to participate. And so part of learning to live as a neighbor is being awake to opportunities as they come. So number one, we've got to I had to retrain my brain to really pay attention to what was happening around me in my particular place. And when you see these opportunities, be awake to them and be available to them. So there's something to be said for me or for anyone to just be like, okay, this feels a little uncomfortable for me, but I'm going to go to the block party. I'm going to go to the chili dinner. I'm going to go next door when somebody invites me over. That can be just as big a deal as being the one planning it.
Right. Yep. Just to say the yes.
Yeah.
Um, that's a great example of how it went swimmingly well for you. I'm wondering if you also have an example of when neighboring went down in flames. And the reason I'm wondering this is because I love it that you're just a real person. And some folks listening maybe feel like they've tried, right?
Yeah.
And it didn't go well. And now I'm not doing that anymore. Yeah. So can you talk to us about that?
Yeah. We had the infamous ice cream sundae disaster of 2000, whatever. I forget what year it was. Where we were like, here's what we'll do. Everybody loves ice cream and we're going to invite, it was actually like a Sunday school class. So like a group of people that we knew, we weren't the best of friends with them, but we were inviting this big group of people over. It's going to be great. Bring the kids. It'll be, the kids can run around and be crazy. And so we bought all the stuff. We bought every topping. If you're just going to do ice cream, you got to like do it up. Might as well. Yeah. And not one single person showed up, not one. And so I think back on that, and there are people to this day who I'm still friends with, and they're like, oh my gosh, Shannan, every time you talk about the ice cream sundae story, we have to relive it too. Because the truth is everybody had their reasons. It wasn't personal, but it can feel like it is. It can feel embarrassing or you just feel rejected. I mean, all of those emotions are really human emotions. And even then the work can be to just like, number one, that's when my kids learned about like squirting the whipped cream directly into their mouth, because we're like, we got a lot of stuff
go
here.
To it. Yep.
So that was fun. But being able to just recover from these things and accept that, stuff goes wrong. Life happens. People forget things. I've done that plenty of times, to get to a place where we don't feel it so much as a personal rejection. And even if there are times when we know it's a personal rejection, when you're trying to kind of invite someone in and it's just not, the other person's not into it, and that can hurt too. But I promise you, there are people around us all the time looking for the same connection that we're looking for. There are people feeling that same kind of low grade loneliness or disconnection, or just like, what are we doing here? That feeling of like, we're all here in the world together, but it doesn't feel like we're together. Like, what are we doing? It's just, it can take time sometimes to recognize and find those other people, but I promise you they're out there. I promise you, whenever somebody says to me, I want to get to know my neighbors, but I'm just so nervous and I'm shy and, all these things. All I can think every time is, your neighbors are so lucky. They don't even know how lucky they are right now that you are right there, and you're feeling the same thing a lot of them are feeling. And you're going to be the one to go first. And you're going to be the one that kind of puts this ball into motion. And I cannot wait to see what happens next, because I know something's going to happen next.
Right. Oh, that's so good. I love that your book is very accessible to folks who have faith is a big deal for them, and also faith people who are just not into it, and just like the altruistic value of building relationships in their communities and their neighborhoods. But when you're talking, I do think, as a person of faith, I think of that passage in Acts where, the Luke says, well, Jesus is talking, but that he's determined the exact time and place where we live, that wasn't an accident. Your zip code isn't just like a dart on the board and we'll see what happens when Kim goes there. It's such a beautiful thought that we are exactly where we need to be. And if we blow it off, we're going to miss something. We're going to miss something really beautiful.
It's so beautiful. And it's also it's not haphazard. And it's also meant for our good. Like, it's not just like whatever, like, who cares? Everybody lives somewhere, and you live here and you live there. I think when we can come to see that, to look around us and say, here you are and here I am, we're both here in the same place at the same time, that has to mean something. And it's going to mean different things for different people. But to allow ourselves to get curious, like, ooh, I wonder what it means. I wonder why it matters that we're both here in this place at this time. I think that's where really beautiful stuff can begin to grow.
Mm. Less of a burden and more of a gift. That's what it feels like to me.
Yeah.
Okay, here's a Mount Everest. However, and you coach through this in the book, and I'd love for you to talk about this. You have very practical, steady advice of how to practice unfussy hospitality, that we need homes, not hideaways, that we take a walk more often than we would, say hello, listen for once, that we don't need more or better. We just need each other. That is such a great sound idea. And now how do we do it?
Well, I think we do it by taking the pressure off of ourselves to be Martha Stewart or whomever. We have these idealized versions of some so-and-so has the gift of hospitality and I don't. Well, that might be true, but what I do know is that we were meant to know each other and to need each other. Like we were built this way. So for me, one of the, I say this all the time because it's so very true. And my story about last night kind of illustrates this. Anything I've come to know about living as a neighbor, I have learned from the people around me. I've learned this straight from my neighbors who have welcomed me into their homes when nothing was perfect, into just the everyday mess that we all exist in. But we feel like if somebody's going to come over, we've got to hide it all away. And we've got to, so we're all out here to some extent pretending that we're living these like really organized, tidy lives. And deep inside, we're afraid that we're the only ones who really aren't. We're the only ones who shove everything in a bedroom and pull the door shut or, I think it's so universal. I think most of us are just doing our best to get through the day. There's a lot going on. There's a lot kind of competing for us and our time and our attention. And so all of that remains true. We are just doing the things that we do in our regular life, being awake and available to any opportunity to connect on any level with the people around us. And so one of the examples I would say is that, just learning to be faster to welcome people into my home just as it is, to give myself that self-talk and that reminder that when I'm invited into somebody's home and it's very lived in and very imperfect, I'm never judging them. I am always feeling very honored and trusted. Yes. And totally. Like I'm an insider now, like they're trusting me with this. And that means I get to trust them with just the way I am, the way my home is. I love to remind us that, I think it matters. It's not a first step. The first step is not go invite somebody into your home for the first time. We've got to build up to that. And so that's what Start with Hello is, like these really tiny steps. But eventually, I think it's great to invite people into our spaces because I think that's just a different layer of vulnerability and like authenticity. But we sure don't have to cook a whole meal to do that. That's pretty intimidating. I love to cook. I'm a good cook and I'm intimidated by that. If I'm having, a bunch of people over, even two people over, the idea, something's going to go wrong. It's stressful. I mean, what if we just made frozen pizza? And that's just what we're going to do. We're not even going to order takeout because that can be kind of expensive. Like, we're going to buy those giant pizzas at Aldi and bring a couple bags of chips and that's dinner, or just have people over for popcorn after dinner, or just a cup of tea at the end of the day. Like we can really scale this down in ways that are more, they're easier for us and they're probably easier for the people being invited in.
Totally. We're just learning this lesson at our house. Mark and I love to cook. We love to have people over, but we were noticing that we were like a little twitchy by the time folks came over because we were too tired. We'd been hustling and doing things that actually they didn't even care about. Right. If I hand them a sloppy Joe, they feel just as fantastic as a homemade lasagna.
Yes.
So I'm not sure I'm not sure where I got that. I don't think my mom gave that to me. I think I've just picked that up along the way. So one thing that we've been doing is shifting things outside. Now, I know this is for the intrepid among us when it's a Midwestern winter, but in general, we head outside. I've got some stuff to, just some things to pick at, just like, snacks,
just
and then
snacks. Yep.
a glass of wine. And I love what you're saying about how the guest's emotional temperature also chills out.
Yeah.
Because we don't actually like walking into a place where we think, wow, this person's been working for me all day.
Right.
That's a horrible feeling.
Totally. It's a lot of pressure. And then you have the idea of, food preferences. And, I know plenty of people who have said it is stressful to eat a meal in somebody's home because I'm a picky eater.
Right.
And I wish I wasn't this way, but I am. And so then I'm there and then it feels awkward, or, there are just so many things that can pop up. And so it's not to say that there's never the right time to like do a dinner. I'm a big fan. I write about this in the book of like, let's get back to this thing that my parents did of like, hey, I have this, just bring whatever you have.
Right.
And let's just eat together.
Right.
And the food might not go together at all. That makes it more fun. But instead of just eating separately in our homes all the time, like, what if we just did this together sometimes? Like there are a lot of different ways to do this. There's not just one.
Yeah, absolutely. I think taking the pressure off the idea of a dinner party is a little bit that we probably don't really need that. We do a lot of breakfast. We do a lot of pancakes. Mm-hmm. And if folks want to come over and you don't even have to, PJs are totally appropriate. The kids are a total mess. Everyone has real strange hair, and most people like a pancake. You can have some gluten-free ones for folks who don't, so just kind of taking that down a notch has been joyful for us. And I love it that you line that up in your book so beautifully about how, we're making these rules and this scaffolding for ourselves and we don't actually need them. And they're not really the gift we intend them to be. So love that.
Well, and nobody really knows why we're doing it.
Right.
Yeah. So we don't have to keep like staying on this hamster wheel. Like, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? We can go first and say like, we're not doing this anymore. Yes. We're going to do it a different way.
Right. Because the goal is actually the together. The goal is not actually the 12-hour Vietnamese pho, unless you're really good at that. Okay. Whether it is having taco night in our messy kitchens, stepping into the fray of discord, injustice, and brokenness, you talk about both of those things. And I think what you're saying is action takes action. You quote Sister Helen Prejean, who says, being kind in an unjust system is not enough. And yet we're looping back to what you said a little bit earlier. The world looks overwhelming. It looks like a big mess. It looks like something I cannot possibly fix in any meaningful way. So coach me on how we bridge being kind with great intentions to actually confronting injustice and working towards something better.
Yeah. It's something that is so deeply important to me, and it grows in importance as I go. And again, I would say it's significantly because of my neighbors and the place where I live that I have come to be really kind of motivated towards justice. So a couple things. I would say kindness has to be the baseline. It can and it must be the baseline. So that comes in handy, especially when we're arguing about things. I like to argue about things. I enjoy that kind of like back and forth. I know not everybody does, but I do. And I am more than willing to engage as long as we stay kind. It matters so much to me, the language we use, that we are always using humanizing language. Some of these things, especially online, that can begin to break down. Right. So that's the baseline. But we've got to come to a place where we can go further than just like, I'm nice, I'm a person. Because one of the things that has happened to me and to many other people, but just for, speaking from my own experiences, as I have leaned into more conversations around racial injustice, these kinds of things, some of the pushback I can occasionally get is that I am somehow creating conflict, or I am, by talking about this injustice that exists in the world, and I'm talking about it from a white woman's perspective. So this is to say nothing to people of color who are kind of waging these battles, but to begin to understand that it's in talking about these difficult things and having these hard conversations. Like that is also part of what it means to live as neighbors.
Right.
It does not mean that like the pact we are signing is that we're just, no politics or religion, because that's not polite. It means we're going to engage on deeper levels and we're going to ask harder questions. We're going to dig deeper together as best we can. And we're not going to go around silencing people because they're talking about things that might make us uncomfortable. Like being in community means welcoming that discomfort into our lives as we rub shoulders with people who are able to show us like a different perspective on the world that we might not have had before. And all of these things change us as we go. So again, that's more of like that might feel like a big step to people. But we've got to work our way towards that so that we can begin to look around us and say, this particular person for this particular reason is suffering. And as their neighbor, like it is my duty to care about this. And I believe the words from the book of Jeremiah, if you're a Christian Bible type of person, that says it basically I'm paraphrasing here, but if our neighbors aren't free, then we're not free either. And to take that to heart and to begin to take up the work of justice. I think it matters deeply in my neighborhood. And I believe that it matters in all of our neighborhoods.
So it sounds like a first step is curiosity, not just kindness and good intentions that stay within our walls, but curiosity embedded with kindness and then shushing up and listening, even when it's uncomfortable. And that, dovetails again back to this fractured feeling that we have and that we all drive into our garages, put down the garage door and go inside and hang out with the people that we know the best. That's a lovely thing. And we need to do that sometimes, but that won't heal anything. That won't heal the broader fracturing, but being curious and listening and saying sentences, starting sentences with help me understand and going from there seems like a really good step.
Yes. It's such a good place to start, to begin to say, tell me more. That's something that prior to living in this neighborhood, I had only been surrounded really for my entire life by communities who looked and lived and believed as I did. And so that was a comfort to me because it didn't provoke me to confront anything that was kind of uncomfortable. And so I'll say that I want to acknowledge that when I moved into this community, all of that changed. And, I had to learn the importance of listening and really giving myself permission. It sounds so strange, but giving myself permission to be really curious and to operate from curiosity and to be a listener and to take up the work of re-educating myself, because I started to just understand there was so much that I didn't know. So for people who might still be living in a place where, a lot of us live in pretty homogenous spaces because that's honestly how this world was designed. And we can ask harder questions about why that might be. But for today, this is about like day one work. And so maybe your day one work is, okay, Shannan's talking to me right now, but what I can do is I can follow different people on social media. I can read different books, buy them, check them out from the library. We can begin to kind of expand our framework and our worldview a little bit by just, we have Wi-Fi, we have a library card, we have access to people who are willing to share their perspective. And that doesn't mean that that's going to automatically change our perspective, but it means that we have opportunities to be curious, to say, I don't know much about this, and to listen and to learn. And those things do, in a world that is trying to push us into our separate corners, those exercises and practices are what ultimately bring us together, which builds our empathy, which brings us to a kinder world.
Yes. Yes. And yes. And sometimes, some really lovely times after that education or in the middle of that, you move your feet. You go to have live conversations with folks, not just kind of passive and absorbing. I think there's a place for that too. But I think you make a very solid point in your book that sometimes you need to move your actual body into another, I'm not even saying your house, just like get out. Yeah.
Yes.
That's where some really good, rich stuff happens.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean that everybody needs to sell their home and move to a different neighborhood. That was my story. So I think some of us need to do that and will do that. But I think, as we begin to kind of cultivate that curiosity, it's pretty amazing the way opportunities do unfold before us, because now we're looking for them. Now we're ready for them. And we might take those baby steps. It's going to take time. It's going to be slow work. But as we're doing that slow work, we find ourselves ready for different opportunities as they come.
Yeah.
And things that, in the past might have been like, oh, I don't know about that. Now we're like, you know what? I am ready for that.
Yeah.
I am ready for that next step. I am ready to kind of lean in a little bit into some of this discomfort, or even into some of this, like, admitting our own blind spots, or, admitting that there's just stuff we don't know and we're ready to learn. I mean, all of that acknowledgement is a really beautiful place to start.
So smart. And you live it beautifully and write about it beautifully. So well done. I can't say enough about it. And also one more thing before we leave, start with hello. Your footnotes are magnificent. That is a very tiny little detail, but I'm a fan of a good footnote. And there were a couple. There was one about your dad having a first name basis with an Amazon worker. Like, I just love those little things that make a story. Ben was just so hilarious.
I am so glad that you're here for the footnotes. It can be a polarizing thing. Some people are like, no.
Oh, I love them. I love them. And my next book has them. So just if you don't like them, don't read them. I think they give total technicolor to the whole story. I love it. So well done.
It makes it more of a conversation. So I'm so glad you liked it. My editor was on board. So I was like, here we go.
You're in. Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, one last question that I love to pose to all of my guests. It's a two-parter. You are a writer. I'm assuming you love books. You have a very fantastic bibliography in this book. So I'm guessing you are a reader of readers. So this is a total book nerd question. Part one, what is a book that you return to over and over and recommend over and over? It could be super long or super old. We're fans of the backlist here, something that just keeps reemerging. And then another that's on your shelf or on your radar, again, doesn't need to be a new book, but a book you haven't read yet that you are excited to devour.
There are so many books that I love to boss people around about what they should read, and I am doing it forever. I am a voracious reader. I would say right now, a book that I keep coming back to various people for different reasons, is How the Word is Passed by Clint Smith. It's a book I quote in Start with Hello.
Okay.
It is a powerful, for anybody who's doing the work of, particularly from, as a white woman. So this probably will mostly resonate maybe with somebody like me, who's like, I'm a white woman. I'm trying to kind of fill in some gaps in what I've learned about the history of race in our country. He is a fantastic writer. And he the way he reframes it, I mean, some of these books can be really important, but they can be really hard to get through. They can be really data heavy. And again, that has its place, but this was just a beautifully written, like, he's talking through personal storytelling and like different encounters he's had at these different landmarks throughout our country. It's just gorgeous.
Okay. Say the title and author again.
It's called How the Word is Passed by Clint Smith. Okay.
And we will link all of these things in the show notes. That's a fantastic recommendation. Okay. Any book that's on your horizon?
Oh man, I feel like I have stacks of books everywhere. I'm like looking around.
It's a problem at our house,
man.
for sure.
I wish I could like run to my bedroom. What is on my stack right now? I'm trying to, I don't have a great suggestion for you other than to say I'm really focusing on fiction right now.
Okay.
I'm trying to read more fiction, and I'm particularly trying to read fiction by authors of color. That's work that I've been doing. I'm reading right now. So I've started it, but I haven't finished yet. But it's called The Swimmers.
Oh, I don't know this.
By Julie Otsuka. Okay. It was recommended to me by a book podcast that focuses mostly on like fiction and memoir by by authors of color.
Color,
And
yes.
it's like quirky and different, unlike anything I've ever read before.
Okay.
But it's like a pretty short read and I'm just kind of flying through it. It's really beautiful. So yeah, that's
Okay.
my overarching thing is like, for me, I want to be a person who's not just reading about, like, this is a book about anti-racism from authors of color. I want to be reading like memoir and cookbooks and fiction and poetry because it just adds to the richness
Totally.
of stuff I've been reading my whole life.
Fantastic. I'm always a fan of someone who writes nonfiction and lives that, but who will open themselves to fiction. Because I think you're right. We learn more to just another layer about the human experience that you
Yeah.
can't get in a nonfiction title.
And it's a different kind of rest and beauty. And,
Mm.
I'm coming out of such an intense work time that I'm like, give me some
Yes.
fiction. Give
Yes.
me like just a story that I can fall into and
Hmm.
escape a little
Yep.
bit. That's what I want right now.
I'm a fan. Shannan Martin, thank you for taking the time in a very busy season to talk with us. I loved your book. I loved your
Thank
heart. I
you.
love what you're all about. And I'm just really grateful for the time. Thanks for making it.
It's an honor to me. Thanks for having me on. I loved it.